Hello! In this video, we'll be reviewing the topics covered in this particular unit. So let's have a look. Well, firstly, we covered cryptology, starting with secret key cryptography, including classical ciphers and modern ciphers. And basically, what you need to understand is the mechanisms of various classical and modern ciphers. So our mid-sem test should remind you about how much understanding you need. And if you really think about modern ciphers, it's just different concepts from the classical ciphers uh, used in combinations in multiple rounds, right? So you need to have a good understanding of the classical ciphers as well as the construct of modern ciphers to see why modern ciphers are much better than classical ciphers, right? You need to have the ability to trace and use classical ciphers. So if you are not familiar, please have a look at the mid-sem test as well as some of the previous past exams available from the library, but I will also put them on LMS. Okay. You also need the ability to read and understand OpenSSL commands. Okay, so that's from the lab. Because it's an open book, you should be able to note down some of the key OpenSSL commands. Okay, and then we looked at public key cryptography, including RSA, Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and elliptical curve cryptography. In addition, hashing and blockchain, right? But ECC, we're not going to be covering that in the exam, just the RSA and DH and hashing and blockchain. Okay? So you should be able to calculate public and private keys for both RSA and Diffie-Hellman key exchanges, understand the applications of hashing, as well as understand the core structure of the blockchains and security issues associated with them. So that's the crypto stuff, and then we moved on to cyber attacks, and from here we covered quite a lot of different topics, starting with social engineering, cracking, malware, and so forth. So from here, what we want to do is understand the mechanisms of different cyber attacks and their tools, right? We're not going to be able to actually demonstrate the use of tools, but you should still understand what is their mechanisms when people created those tools, what they do, right? So we need to have a good understandings about them, as well as what those attacks are trying to do and what are their attack vectors, how they launch those attacks. Ability to choose appropriate attacks for identified vulnerabilities. So if you look at some past exams, often you are described with some sort of a vulnerable system, then you should be able to identify appropriate cyber attacks that you can do to maximize your impact or achieve the specified goals. Okay, so you need to be able to understand which one corresponds, what kind of techniques you can apply to different vulnerabilities. Okay, and also understand malware goals and their methods of impacting the systems. Okay, so for example, if I ask you right now, what is the difference between virus and a worm? You should be able to answer that, hopefully top of your head. But it's fine if you need to go back and read through because that's part of the revision. Okay, so more topics like malware down to 0-day, basically similar points as before. Okay, and from the general categories of cyber attacks, we moved on to more categorized versions of the attacks, starting with the network, including sniffing, spoofing, remote access, and denial of service. Okay, so from here, what we want to take away is understands how network attacks are carried out and their impact consequences. Okay, so how would you go about carrying out a reverse shell, for instance? Understands the logic behind buffer overflow attacks, why and how it can happen, and mitigation techniques to prevent them. Okay, so all of those are actually well described in the lecture notes, so just go over them for revision, and hopefully you don't really need your lecture notes to remember all of those, but having them will probably be handy. Okay, web-based attacks, we looked at injections, particularly SQL, as well as cross-site scripting, the concepts about it, and also the ransomware. So from here, what we want to take away is understands various SQL injection attacks, you should definitely understand and have a comprehensive understanding about different types of attacks we described during the lectures. Although they are basic ones, you should have a thorough understanding of them, and you don't really have to understand beyond what we have covered in the lectures, but if you have done your self-study and are applicable to answer the question better, then you can use your knowledge as well. And you should also understand the cross-site scripting steps and the mechanisms. We covered two different types of cross-site scripting. You should be able to differentiate which one might be better suited for different scenarios that we are facing. Okay? Protection methods for injections and cross-site types of attacks, and also understand the mechanisms involved in each steps of the ransomware. So if you think about ransomware, we had 6 main steps, but the core steps of the ransomware only a couple of them, and all the mechanisms are pretty much what we already know, because mainly it's the crypto that does the ransomware stuff, right? So you should be able to understand the whole life cycle of the ransomware and how to carry these out. Okay? For instance, if I want to share the ransomware, what will be the best route? Okay. Next, we looked at a bunch of defense mechanisms, starting from protocols, tools, and techniques methods. Okay. So here you want to have a solid understanding in details of the security protocols in the lectures. Okay, so we covered a few, mainly 3, right? So the SSL, IPsec, and HTTPS. Well, HTTPS was joined with SSL, so pretty much 2, right? Because we kind of skimmed through VPN. And understands techniques used for the security tools, understands when and where different security techniques methods can be used, and their pros and cons. And then we moved on to security management, covering from standards all the way to security models. Okay, understands the use of security standards. We covered 2 security standards, and we also want to understand how we can utilize them and have a good insight into steps and processes involved in implementing security standards. We also looked at risk assessment techniques. There are a few different types. We only looked at a couple of examples, so you only have to be familiar with the ones that we covered. Use of models, their capabilities and limitations, and can construct attack trees and evaluate security. So we, during the security modeling lectures, we covered some examples using attack trees, so you should be able to construct that and or use it to evaluate security. Okay, secure software, and this is where a lot of fun things happen, so I highly recommend you to revise this section thoroughly. Secure software development all the way to requirement design and testing we covered. So you should have a good understanding about different software development life cycles. Although we covered one particular in detail, you should generally have a good understanding of what software development lifecycle is and when and where different security activities may fit in. Okay, requirements formulation, that was done through Square. Okay, understand a good concept about how requirements can be generated in detail. Security design principles and techniques, as well as security testing and their usage. Okay, and we also have emerging security issues. Things like emerging networking technologies, vehicle security, homomorphic encryption, security humans, mobile security. But this generally captures the future research directions and limitations of current research in the described fields of study. Okay, so hopefully this overview should give you a good summary of what you might need to focus on studying and revise through. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video about examples of potential exam questions. Bye!